You may want to take a look at a couple of slides for exercise 6. It's talking about incremental updates. And starting on slide 39, they're really giving a pretty good example of why we want to use this code where we're moving an object by incrementally doing something like adding one or another value to its current position. So before we get into the code on this one, if you take a look at the slide, it's kind of giving a scenario of what if we created a variable called enemy y and that its initial vertical value was 0, so it was top of the page. So maybe there's a character enemy and maybe it's going to move. I think this gives you a context for this, so I thought it makes sense to reference that slide for a moment. To make it move towards the bottom, you could redefine it. You could say something like, after initially creating the enemy variable, and giving it that initial value of 0, so it has a starting point, you could then follow that up with more code. So it's interesting how this looks. You're essentially substituting a new value at this point by having the variable name equals, and then you're basically saying it is its current value plus 1. And instead of this making the object or character just move 1 pixel and stop, it's going to continue doing that over and over again because it's looping automatically. I think it's important to understand that within P5, any code that is placed inside the draw code block is looping automatically. It's playing over and over and over again. Setup, by the way, is different. That code block that we always use for setup or initial things like the canvas size only plays once and then stops. So it's special that we're putting things inside draw that may involve movement or interactivity. As an aside, because anything in draw loops, the stuff in setup does not. So that starts to make sense, that just by saying we're going to take your current value and add 1 to it, if you told it to do that over and over and over again, it's gradually moving. And you can also experiment if you wanted it to jump in, say, 2 pixel increments. Then maybe you have something like enemy y plus 2. You could try different values in there. And I think these few slides are really good to look at while you're doing this exercise. Then we'll come back into it. So the instructions first are giving you quite a bit of setup. There's a little circle that's on the left side, and there's 2 variables that have already been defined for the horizontal and vertical position. So you can see their values right at the top. And then they're being called as arguments inside circle. So just right down here, circle function is telling it to draw the circle to the page. And those 2 variables placed there are then giving it the initial position. So it's just to get comfortable with what's there already. What we want to do is see this circle move from left to right. So we want to take this initial position that was specified at 25 and make it increment gradually. So you're basically going to override the initial value. So that means you're going to be adding code down in the draw section. It actually says add code below. And you're going to redefine it. You're going to say circle horizontal equals the current value plus 1. Let's see the finished version. So I'll bring that forward, and it's just this one line of code down here in the bottom. This is a fun one to try, where you're redefining the variable and saying it is now its current value plus 1. Let's hit run to see that play, and then you're seeing it loop. So it's gradually moving over across the screen 1 pixel at a time. I encourage you to experiment. What if we said it's incremented by 5? It looks like it's moving faster. It's actually jumping in bigger increments. 2. So that's something to experiment with and consider. So this is pretty interesting exercise, actually.